Matt. Thank you for this interview. Can I ask you to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about yourself?
I'm Matt Davenport. I'm a criminal defense attorney here in Greenville, North Carolina. And I'm married with two children who are 11 and 15.
How many years do you live in Greenville?
I've lived in Greenville 19 years now. Hard to believe, but 19 years.
Do you like Greenville, and why do you like Greenville?
I do like Greenville. I first came to Greenville when I was in college at Campbell, which is about an hour and a half from here. And my roommate in Campbell was from Greenville, and I came and visited with him and liked it. It's I like it because it's a college town. I like it because it's close enough to the beach and the Outer Banks and the pretty parts of eastern North Carolina, and also close enough to where I can still go to the mountains and out to Raleigh if I want to. It's a nice location with a lot of beauty around it.
I know that you made a switch in your career from being a prosecutor to becoming a lawyer. Why this decision occurred? Why you switched your focus, professional focus?
I loved being a prosecutor. Uh, that was my second job out of law school. I had done defense work right out of law school in Raleigh and had learned a lot about indigent defense work and representing people on the court appointed list. But I just didn't find any satisfaction in that job at that firm at that time, and it was stressful. And I saw that the DA's office here was hiring, so I decided to come and interview. And then the man who became one of my many mentors, Clark Everett, hired me, and I worked in the DA's office here for close to 5 years. I loved that job because the job of a prosecutor is to do justice. So you're not representing victims, you're not representing police officers, you're not representing individual people, you're representing the people. So your job is to try to do justice, and in each case, that doesn't always mean a conviction. Sometimes that means you help someone a little bit that has a clean record, give them a second chance. Sometimes that means you do punish somebody. And you also have an obligation to make victims whole again. After being in the DA's office a number of years and trying cases that ran the gamut, all the way from traffic court and driving while impaired cases, a little bit of juvenile court, domestic violence cases, all the way up through jury trials, drug felonies, violent felonies, some home invasions, some attempted murder cases. At that point, our son had been born, and I had seen a lot. I had gotten to know a lot of private attorneys that did defense work, and saw they really had satisfaction in their work. I had done defense work. I believed in. I really believed in the importance of both jobs, prosecutor and defense, and thought, I think I can do that. The other issue, as much as I loved my work, was there really wasn't much upward mobility in the office at the time. A lot of my colleagues had been there longer, a little longer, or a lot longer than I had, and I didn't have anywhere to move up. And I guess looking for a new challenge, I challenged myself and really went out on a limb to go and cashed out my retirement, bought a bunch of office furniture and a Xerox machine and stationery, and started with nothing. And it took a while to get going. I think people don't think of lawyers as small business owners, but that's what most of us are. We're small business owners. So I started with one employee, and it was tough. And then I got an intern, and then another intern, and then I hired an intern part-time and then full-time, and then got more interns, and then have slowly grown to a point where I'm comfortable that I can still represent people. And the job of defense is so different from prosecutor, but at the same time I can get the same satisfaction, because instead of having one boss in the district attorney that I worked for and making sure I did justice for the people that I represented, I have a few hundred bosses, all my clients, and I'm supposed to represent each one of them zealously and ethically and honestly. And I can do that even though in many cases that they did what they're accused of doing. It's it's important to remember that we're all better than our worst moment. I know that I am. And so it's nice to try to get somebody moving forward in their life with, normally, in the vast majority of cases, this is the only time they tangle with the law, that they make a mistake where they get caught and it becomes a legal issue. And you want it to be a stepping stone for them. The counselor side of you tries to get them back where they're not going to let this affect them, they're not going to get in more trouble, and they're going to move forward, so it's a stepping stone. And I like being able to do that. So I've enjoyed being a defense attorney just as much.
Can you tell about your most memorable case?
I've had many memorable cases as a defense lawyer. What I can't do is talk about them. Although legally I'd be able to talk about what the public knew. A lot of them made papers or the news, but my job as a defense lawyer is to try to keep my clients' cases flown under the radar, and I don't want anyone thinking about them. They've already had their mug shots on the Reflector and on the internet. They've already had to go to court. Some of them had articles written about them in papers. If I talk about specific ones, even though they're over, I'm bringing it back up again. I don't want to do that. So I will say the most memorable case I had as a prosecutor, and I will not say names, this one individual, this man, had been caught stealing a lemon meringue pie from someone's home. Well, I think they were away for vacation in the first case. I didn't handle the first case, but it's relevant to the one I handled. They had lemon meringue pie stolen from him, and he got caught with it right down the street. And so he got charged, and when they came home and saw that their house had been broken into, the only thing stolen was this pie, and maybe some other food, but I think it was just the pie. And so he gets charged with a felony, because it's a felony to break into someone's house to steal, or to commit a felony therein. So he got 2 felonies: felony breaking and entering, felony larceny after breaking and entering. And another prosecutor reduced those, said he doesn't deserve to have a felony for this. Is ridiculous. Well, he kept doing it. He kept breaking into house, apartments, workplaces, stealing baked goods. It wasn't like he's stealing groceries. He's stealing baked goods. And I had heard his name around, and I had heard about the cases, but finally then I get a case, and it's the same man, and he has broken into the separated garage of one of the sororities here, and it was right after a parents' weekend, and they had a carrot cake in the refrigerator, and the carrot cake was stolen out of the refrigerator, and the police officer came to me and said, "I've got a habitual felon case." A habitual felon is serious. It's someone that has 3 prior felonies, and then they commit a 4th. It's tough to be a habitual felon. Anyway, he said, "I got a habitual felon case. This guy broke in and stole a carrot cake out of the separated the storage building of the sorority." And I said, "I know exactly who it is." And so he's charged with 2 felonies again. And I said, "Oh." And I went to my boss and I said, "What am I supposed to do with this?" I mean, with his record now, he's facing 12, 15 years for stealing a carrot cake. I don't feel like that's right. And my boss said, "I don't know what else we can do, Matt. We have tried. We reduced case after case. We tried and tried. He was eligible for habitual felon last time. We didn't do it. What are we supposed to do?" And I said, "All right." So he told me I had to prosecute this. So I go and have to try this in front of a jury. And I went with the victim witness assistant to the sorority house to talk to the 2 witnesses that had seen him. And the funny part of the case is they had heard a rustle out in the separate garage. They went out there with flashlights, and they see him coming out on his bike with the carrot cake, and he's already eaten some of it, and he just looks at him and says, "Don't call the cops." So, of course, they call the police. And the police get there, and they say, "Oh, we know who it is, and we know where he lives." So they went and found him, and they arrest him. So when we go and meet with these girls who are witnesses, Dawn, the paralegal, and I, they all had the same sentiment. "Oh, please, we don't want him. He was just hungry." And I said, "I'm sorry, I've got to prosecute him. He just keeps doing this. He's breaking into everyone's house." So we got it in front of a jury, and the jury felt so bad. They're all looking at me like I'm the bad guy. And I said, "I'm sorry, you know." And then they saw his record. And once he was convicted and he faced a few months in prison for this, I conferenced with the judge and we ended up saying, oh, we're not going to do habitual felon. I could do 12 to 15 years. I have seen him a lot since. And when I see him, I don't know that he knows that I'm the one that, at that point, at that one moment, decided not to pursue habitual felon on him for a carrot cake. Unfortunately, I think he's done it some sense. But anyway, that was a funny, we could still call it the baked goods bandit, but...
I wanted to ask you, who inspires you the most?
That's really tough. In the law, it would have been my first prosecutor I worked for here. That gave me my job and gave me the ability to come to Greenville and taught me a lot of what I know, and that was Clark Everett. He was the district attorney here for a number of years. He was actually a prosecutor for more than 30 years here. And Clark, he used to tell me, you know, the prosecutor has a lot of power in the courtroom. You can choose when cases are set. You can choose what to do with cases. And he said, just remember this. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And I always remember that. And he always was good at telling me and others that worked for him that it's always clear in every case, in every decision you make in a courtroom or with a client or with a victim or with a witness, there's always two roads and you always can see the high one and always take that one. Clark's one of my, he inspires me in the law. And you know, you have other inspirations in parts of your life, but if for my career professionally, Clark.
I know that you published a book and you're working on a second one. Can you tell more about this aspect of your life?
I'm interested in history, and I always thought that another person who inspires me is David McCullough, who's a writer of history, nonfiction, and here, mostly American history, but he covers a lot of different areas. And I've heard him say and articulate what I have felt for many years, which is that history is not taught right in schools. It's taught as a series of dates and a sequence of events and obscure provisos, and it's always about politics and the military, and it never talks about what really happened to real people. And it should be taught as a story. And I like what they call narrative history, where someone like David McCullough or Ron Chernow and his books on Hamilton and Washington and Grant and other writers, or Barbara Tuchman with The Guns of August, that they can write a nonfiction history book and make it interesting by telling a story about the people involved. So I got interested in this one event. I've got a list of things that fascinate me that I'd like to write about, but this one event, it was just happened to be a battle that a friend of my grandfather had fought in World War I back in 1918, and I didn't know anything about it, and I read something about it in a book. I wanted to know more, and I looked for a book on it, and I couldn't find one. And so I said, you know, I'd like to know more. So when we were on a vacation in Washington, D.C., I went up to the National Archives and did the whole registration thing, and I actually went in, pulled some of the archives, and found out some fascinating information, and got boxes of stuff on it, and slowly accumulated more and more, and tracked down ancestors of the soldiers who had fought in this battle, and got their stories, and contacted their relatives, and they were giving me letters and diaries and journals, and I said, this is a really good story, and it should be told, so maybe I should try to write the book that I want to read. And so I spent 5 years researching it and then wrote it, and somehow, through stroke of largely luck, Macmillan St. Martin's Press decided to publish it. And that took me to a whole other world, which was great. I got to go speak literally coast to coast, and was on book TV a couple of times, and the New York Historical Society, really in company with other authors and historians that I look up to so much. And that kind of kept a firewall between that world and this world. You know, here I like practicing law, but I really like writing about history. And once that bit me, that bug bit me, I decided to try to keep going. And I am fascinated by this other event, this 1906 earthquake and fire in San Francisco, and I have spent the last 5 years. I'm into my 6th year now researching that and writing it, and that'll be hopefully out next year. And so that's a side part of my life. Since I don't golf, I have a lot of free time in the weekends, and I really like researching and writing about history, especially history that's not told that much.
I see that your office in Uptown is right across the street from Coastal Fog.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask you about recent events that happened in Uptown. What is your opinion on that? Like, how do you see this situation?
You talking about the protests from a couple of nights ago, and ongoing?
Yeah, if your place being affected by the...
No, it wasn't affected. And Coastal Fog and a few other businesses had broken windows. I know the courthouse had a broken window, and I had a colleague who had a broken window. But that's it. It's property damage, and as I say, glass can be replaced and lives can't. I in working in the criminal courts for 20 years, have seen a lot just in this one county, one of 100 counties of one of the 50 states. And it really wasn't until 2014 that this national case hits me, and it was Eric Garner. Seeing him on video getting choked to death on a street corner and screaming, "I can't breathe," and the officer that killed him not getting even prosecuted. And I started at that point, personally for me individually, I'm the only one I can speak for, that really awakened me to something I should have been awoken to long before. And since then, every single case has in differing degrees disturbed me even more, that it can keep happening. And this, of course, then Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and now with Mr. Floyd. I think, like many, unfortunately not all, but like many Americans and people in the world with any humanity saw it, and I was angered and saddened and everything else, horrified. So I decide myself, there's a lot of things you can do. I think for too long, the real problem of racism in the country, the conversations have been led by people with my skin color and my own privilege, white mouths leading the discussions. I don't think that should be the case. So I think the first thing that I individually can do, and so only speaking for me, is to, like I tell my kids, you're born with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So you need to listen more than you talk. So I have decided that one of the first things I can do is listen and hear what someone else in another position that deals with this has to say. I need to hear them. I need to understand that when people talk about privilege, my privilege is that I can learn about racism, but I don't have to live with it every day and every night. So I need to learn from those who have to deal with it. And that means listening and hearing from black friends, black colleagues, coworkers, and neighbors. And then the second thing is to have a conversation with my children about it. And we spent years watching peaceful protests be lambasted. I don't know if you can find a more peaceful way to bring to shine a light on a problem than by taking a knee and praying silently. It's not even marching down the street and taking up anyone's time. This is taking a knee silently to make a statement. And that was lambasted. And I can't find a more peaceful way. I can't think of a more peaceful way than that. So if people around me are all yelling about that and upset about that, and now they're upset about protests that are happening in their towns, I say, well, someone has got to hear them. So I have a conversation with my kids, and I say, because I never had that conversation with my parents. My parents never had that talk with me. and we've had many, and we're going to have more. We're having more because of this, about race. And fortunately, my children are growing up in a much more diverse school and community than I did in the Midwest. Um, and that enlightens you early. It breaks down ignorance early. And then the third thing is to try to do something beyond, everyone says there's keyboard warriors, keyboard social warriors on Facebook. There's plenty. That's part of it. I think saying that you're an ally is a big deal, but the next thing's action. So in our own corners of the community, in our own professions, we can all make a little difference. And in my little corner, there's a lot of things I'm bad at. I'm not good at going out and getting signatures or petitions and things. I'm pretty much an introvert. But I can use the abilities I have and the experience I have in the legal system to try to help, to take on more pro bono cases and not charge, to do more free work for people trying to clean up a background check, criminal record, to try to get jobs. There's a lot of ways that individuals do not know how to clean up their backgrounds because the law's very convoluted on it. And so I can try to do that and take on more of those, and take on more. Recently I've told our public defender to take on some court-appointed cases and say, I'm just going to handle these, and do them for free. There's just ways to try to help, because I heard a saying one time, a lot of people are born on third base and they spend their life thinking they hit a home run. And I know I was not born in the dugout. And unfortunately in my work, I see a lot of people who are, and they have a lot further to go than I ever had to go. So that's a long answer. I'm sorry, but I am glad. I'm hopeful for progress.
Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for this interview.
Sure, absolutely. It was nice talking to you.